Hello again. I am Lawrence Wagner, the Senior Engineer for Eichler Radiant Heating. This video will focus on the pressure testing of the Eichler Radiant Tubing. In August of 1999, I was nationally published in a trade magazine advocating a standardized testing procedure for any radiant system. I felt that the industry needed guidance on the best method to obtain a valid pressure test result for the Eichler home. Contractors who do not follow these procedures will result in their failure to identify a leaking condition in the home. Can a hydrostatic pressure test cause damage to the radiant copper tubing? No. The burst pressure of a type L copper tube is greater than 500 psi and 1000 psi when embedded in the concrete. A pressure test of 100 psi or less certainly will not cause a copper tube to burst. A properly administered pressure test of 45 to 100 psi will, when monitored for 45 minutes, detect any large or small leaks. The closer the test is to 100 psi, the better the test with faster results. Testing at pressures below 45 psi won't identify small leaks unless the duration of the test exceeds an hour or more. Overpressurization of any steel radiant tubing, which has been subjected to degradation, may cause damage and the system to leak. We recommend that any steel tube radiant tubing be hydrostatically tested for a minimum of 2 hours at the operating pressure noted on the gauge or 10 psi. Eichler Radiant Heating recommends only qualified contractors perform the hydrostatic pressure test following basic guidelines. Failure to do so will in most cases produce invalid results. To begin, the system shall be at ambient temperature for a minimum of 24 hours prior to the test during the heating season and 8 hours during the non-heating season. This means that the boiler will have its standing pilot turned off if so equipped, and the thermostat and main boiler power set to the off position. The air expansion tank shall be isolated or removed from the system. The pressure relief valve shall be removed from the system. It is not sufficient to plug or cap this valve. It must be removed from the test side of the system when testing through the boiler. Don't flush the radiant panel prior to the test. Test any copper system at 45 to 100 psi and any steel system to the pressure noted on the system gauge or 10 psi. After removing any air and before filling, a hose connected to the city water supply is a good method to pressurize the system for the test. Testing may be accomplished with the boiler installed if the foregoing conditions are met. The best test of the radiant tubing is to isolate it from the boiler equipment. This is not always practical on some of the older systems. When possible and prior to the test, always install good quality isolation ball valves and hose bibs on the radiant supply and return piping to isolate the concealed radiant tubing from the boiler equipment. The test must be performed by the hydrostatic method. This means to use only water to pressurize the tubing. The introduction of any gas, that is helium, nitrogen, and compressed air, to pressurize a system is totally unacceptable and will in most cases produce an invalid test result. Verification of the system pressure prior to, during, and after the test is extremely important. Ensure an external pressure gauge with a minimum of 1 psi or less gradations is installed on the test equipment. Under no circumstances should the existing system pressure gauge be used to validate the test. If any drop in the pressure is noted, inspect all fittings for leaks when testing through the boiler, repressurize the system with water only, and perform the test a minimum of 3 times to verify the results. Finally, if these procedures are followed, anytime 2 qualified contractors perform a test, the same conclusions of a leak or no leak condition is assured. There have been many cases where we have performed another test after it was determined the system was leak-free and it contained obvious leaks. Thank you for joining me for this presentation. I challenge you to ensure that your contractor performs the pressure test following these procedures. Please visit our website at radiantheat.net for more information. Until next time, this is Lawrence Wagner, Senior Engineer for Anderson Radiant Heating.